Hello and welcome to the briefing room. I'm Bill Froehlich from WTCM Radio. This is our weekly roundup of some of the news stories that have been making headlines as we talk with the journalists that are covering those stories. And with us at the table this week from the Petoskey News-Review, we welcome back Jeremy McBain. Thanks for coming back.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Good to get you down here before the snowstorm, the first big heavy snow, right?
I can't wait.
Well, you made it down smoothly, so that's good from Petoskey. We are coming up on the holiday season. We're coming up on the winter season. One of the stories in the Petoskey News is the wind and the power outages. I mean, that's always, it affects everybody, and it's almost a non-story, but everybody's talking about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, anytime in northern Michigan, anytime you talk about weather, you're going to get a lot of readers interested in on it because, you know, if you live in the woods in northern Michigan, that the power is kind of iffy at times when the wind starts to blow, especially. So yeah, we're getting, you know, we call it the winter weather beat, and so it's the winter weather beat starting up now, and we're supposed to get some snow in this weekend. I'm hearing, which is going to be good because it's been such a difference between this year and last year.
All right.
And it's kind of fun to look at those pictures from last year and compare them to this year.
Yeah.
We had all that snow last year at this time, and now it's
still 60 degrees
yeah,
this past
walking
week.
around without a coat on sometimes. But it's coming, and it will be good because we're going into Thanksgiving week, which means a lot of hopefully tourists will be up here, and hopefully it gets cold enough for them to start making snow on the mountains.
Right.
And get some skiers in.
That would be good. That would be good for them. Well, talk to us about what else is in the Petoskey news here lately. I know one of the stories that we talked about before sitting at the table was construction at the Headlands, and I'm not sure where that stands right now.
Well, where it stands is that they're trying to, just to back up a little bit, they're at the Headlands, they're constructing a kind of a museum and observatory for their dark sky park. It is going to cost several millions of dollars, and they took out a bond to pay for it that wasn't voted on by the voters. Notice that's kind of the background to it. But they're trying to get a lot of the work in before we start getting into the snow and trying to stay on the timeline for the work. And they're also trying to stay under budget, but they're having a problem right now with the cement. The cement bids that were coming in were over budget, and in order to get them, in order to rebudget it out, rebid the process out, it was going to put them behind schedule. So what they were debating doing is whether or not to let the contractor that's up there just do the cement himself. And they decided to ultimately do that, stay under budget and on time. So the story here is that, one, the contractor's going to do the cement, and two, Emmett County is still kind of shooting from the hip when it comes to the planning for this project, which they've been doing all along.
I was going to ask, because I don't think I'm putting words in your mouth, but correct me if I'm wrong, lots of questionable decisions at the county level about this project all along, questions about legality, ethics of what the county commission has been doing. Other than your reporting, I mean, has there been any fallout yet? Have people in the community raised this stink? Has anybody filed a complaint, a lawsuit, any of that?
No, there's been no lawsuits complained, but there's been a lot of complaints in the community. We've had a lot of letters to the editor in the Petoskey News-Review about this issue, people saying, why are we building up at the Headlands when at the same time our roads are falling apart in Emmett County? And also in the news in Petoskey, and this is related to it, the Sheriff's Department, Emmett County Sheriff's Department, is basically begging for 2 new deputies for the force. But the commissioners are balking at that, saying, you know, we don't really know if we have the money for it. So they're saying, on one hand, we don't know if we can afford to have 2 deputies, but here we are building this new facility up at the Headlands Dark Sky that was started with really no plan and no feasibility study whether or not it was even needed, and used with financing from a bond that wasn't even voted on by the voters. So there's a lot of controversy in Emmett County about it.
Could anything be done to stop it? I mean, that would be my next question: is what would it take for, someone to hit the brakes on it? What would it take for someone to file a complaint formally, either with the county, the state? I don't know what options there would be.
I don't know if you really can stop it at this point, or even there's a part of me that thinks, should it even be stopped? Because if you were to stop it, now you got a half-constructed facility up there. So it's part of me is saying, and I hate to give my opinion. Part of me is saying, well, just finish the thing now, since you've already started it.
Right.
But I have a feeling that what's going to happen from this isn't so much that this project's going to be stopped, but that you're going to see a very interesting county commission election in the next go-around, which I believe is another year. I think that these commissioners could quite possibly see some strong competition for their seats.
Yeah.
At least that's what we're hearing, too.
No talk of recounts, or recalls, rather, at this point?
I haven't heard any talk of recalls, no.
All right. What else? Speaking of elections, we just came off election season, and I'm not sure how you feel that went, either locally or for the paper, but we can also tie that into your digital content, too, because I know that's been a big part of what you guys have undertaken, and election night was no different.
Oh, yeah. So I mean, we're very digitally oriented, the Petoskey News-Review. I mean, I'm constantly pushing digital on there, and in fact, that's why I spend a lot of my time now working on it with the staff is digital. And the election night was no different. It used to be where you would have to wait, the readers would have to wait till the next day to read it in the Petoskey News-Review whether or not, who won.
Right.
In city council elections or county commission elections. Now it's, I mean, almost instantaneously. Once we find out what the vote tallies are, we're putting them up online as they're coming in. So you can follow right along with the reporter as the reporter's tallying up the vote numbers, or the city clerk is tallying up the vote numbers, which is neat. But there's some ethics involved in that, is you don't want to report things too much before the polls close or anything like that. I mean, you see that in the national elections all the time, and I have a lot of criticism for the way national elections are covered because of that. So we're very cognizant of that. And how the elections went this year, we had some big ones in the city of Charlevoix and in Boyne City. And I would say that they really went how I figured they would go. You had in Charlevoix, in the city of Charlevoix, you had two seats in the city council being contested. And one was a write-in. One person was going for one seat, was a write-in against an incumbent, and the other one was an incumbent against a regular candidate. And the incumbent in the regular candidate race, the incumbent was known for saying some pretty outlandish things, like calling artists who would display artwork in the park, in East Park in Charlevoix at a certain art fair, hobos, and I'm sorry, not hobos, he called them gypsies. And he called people who were enjoying a restaurant at a brew pub near his dental office a hobo convention. And these are things that he would say during city council meetings. These are very outlandish things. So I had a feeling that his seat was pretty much in jeopardy from some of the things that he had been saying. And it went that way. He was up against a pretty well-funded competition, and he lost. So you have a new person taking over that seat. And then in the other seat, which was up against an incumbent up against a write-in, it's very difficult for a write-in to win.
Sure.
But I knew that this write-in had a lot of money behind them and a lot of ground support. And the incumbent, she's a good lady. I know her well, she really doesn't say too many things that are outlandish. She does speak from the heart a lot, which can sometimes be a little strong. And I knew that might hurt her a little bit, but still she's up against a write-in. And that race was very close, as I thought it would be. And the incumbent ended up winning over the write-in, but it was only like 2 votes, I believe.
Oh, wow.
So it was a very, very close race. Over in Boyne City, not as much controversy in the race, but it pretty much finished off like I thought it would be.
Did you see, excuse me, were you able to see or follow on election night digitally what races people were most interested in? And again, aside from the specifics, how important is that technology to you to be able to track, all right, this is what people are paying the most attention to, and then does that alter or change the course of your reporting, saying, all right, people are really interested in this county or this race or this city commission?
Yes, it does. It's very important to me because I'm following. I've got on my cell phone, I have an application on my cell phone where I can follow exactly who's on my website. I can't see that Bill Froehlich is looking at my website right now. It tells me how many people are looking at my website and what stories are looking at my website. And I've got screens in the newsroom that show this too, so you can see what's really moving on the website. And on election night, that's very important to me because I can tell, I knew that from looking at the numbers that night that people were more interested in the Charlevoix race. And that didn't surprise me because I knew that there was a lot of interest in it because it was a very controversial race.
Sure.
So I can use those analytics in order to say to that reporter, look, I'm going to put another reporter on with you so that you guys can split up your time a little more and get a little more details on this race, and so we can get those numbers up a little faster. And then I'm also going to take that story and I'm going to put it at the top of the website so that it's right there as soon as the readers come onto the website, they can see it right away. And I make those decisions based upon the interest levels that I'm seeing on the analytics, the real-time analytics and the historical analytics on those types of stories, so I can move them around the website, determine how many people I want to put on the story. I knew that the Boyne City race was also going to be followed quite closely, so I knew that was going to be like my number 2 story on the website. But then there was another race that was running, which was, I believe it was a road issue, and that wasn't generating a lot of, when I would look at the historical data on stories about that race, it wasn't generating a lot of views. There wasn't a lot of interest in that, but it's still an important story. So I knew that I had to put a reporter still on that story because of its importance, but I knew that it didn't need to be my 1 or 2 story on the website. It could be, I could have some other stories in front of it, but it still needed to be, in a primary location, just because ethically, it's your main job.
It's a big story, yeah.
Yeah. But I adjusted where I was moving around at and how many people I could put on that story that night.
You had podcasts or video. I know you added a lot of different elements too with candidates. A lot of different elements to PetoskeyNews.com over the last couple of years as well. So elections, or even aside from elections going forward, how important are those other elements of what has traditionally been a newspaper?
I think that they're going to become very important because they're going to be more ways for users. And I call them users because no longer are people just reading things in the paper. Now they can view them through a video. They can listen to them through podcast. So I call them users a lot more. They're becoming to be more important because they're giving more information to those users. Whereas in the past you had just the story that you could write, and maybe a few pictures, and the story would come through the filter of a writer. And whereas we're trained to be unbiased and we're trained to report the facts, there's still a certain amount of filter that takes place,
right.
Just because of the space constraints that the writer has. Well, a lot of it is space constraints that the writer has. Whereas with podcasts and video, that filter's taken away a bit more. You can, like with the videos that we would do videos of candidates, especially on the big one, for big elections like next year, the presidential election, and coming up with the first congressional district election, which is going to be big. We plan on doing lots of videos of candidates, video interviews of candidates, so you can see the candidate respond to the question, the exact question that the reporter gave them. And you can hear their exact answer, see their facial features as they give the answer. For the podcast, what's neat about that is you're going to be able to listen. I mean, you're on the radio, and there's a lot of value to that, to hearing somebody's voice. So it can allow for an enhancement of the news story. So you can read the news story itself, but then you can also hear a podcast, or you can look at a video and get even more information about it, about those candidates. And I think it's very important, and I'm going to be ramping those up quite a bit, especially with this next election.
Does it add staff? Does it just add responsibilities to existing staff? How have you managed that whole process of, we have a new digital age now, we're doing things differently, who does what?
Well, I would love to say I had to add staff, but in this economy, it's difficult to add staff. So what I had to do, and it does add more responsibilities, I had to restructure my staff. It doesn't mean anybody lost their job or anything like that. It means that I have people now who are doing different things than they were doing even a year ago. So I took my staff, here's what I did. I took my staff, and I took half the staff and said, you are going to focus on print, because there is a high importance that we need high quality stories for our print products.
Right.
And I need you to focus on that. And I took the other half of the staff and said, you are going to focus on digital, because there's a need for high quality digital, because we're trying to meet two different audiences now. There's a print audience and a digital audience. So I can't just take a reporter and say, all right, I know you're working on all this print stuff, so I'm just going to add all this digital stuff on top of that. And oh, by the way, you have to do this within 40 hours each week. That's impossible, but there are a lot of media companies that are doing that.
Yes, there are.
So I say that's silly. Let's restructure. So we're going to split it down the middle. We've got a print-focused team and a digital-focused team. Print focus doesn't mean that they are not doing any digital. They're just going to dabble in digital a bit. The digital focus team doesn't mean they're not doing print. They'll dabble in print. He'll help out print when they get a chance. But their focus is going to be digital. Their focus is going to be print. In addition to that, I had to go and take a look at all the beats and all the areas of coverage that we did, and I had to make adjustments, meaning some areas we had to cut back on or even eliminate, and other areas we expanded on. For example, I cut back on some of the smaller towns that we cover. I mean, it doesn't mean we're not going to cover them outright. It means that I just don't have a reporter that covers them all the time. We'll go in and when there's big stories. But I expanded in regional enterprise types, where watchdog investigations and that, because I saw through various focus groups and reader surveys and analytics through online that there was a high value in our readers in those types of stories. So I wanted to be able to give the readers exactly what they're looking for,
right, and
something I could do better than anybody else could do in our area. So I expanded in that role with the print reporters. And then over on the digital side, I pulled back on some of the areas that some of these reporters that were traditionally doing on print, and said, okay, I need more podcasts from you, so you're going to be doing more podcasts now. So I'm expanding on the amount of podcasts we're doing. And you are doing more videos, so we're expanding on the amount of videos that we're doing. So there's a lot of give and take.
What about social media? Facebook, Twitter, the other elements that you're on?
Those are very important because they will feed a lot of traffic to the website. They act almost like an advertisement, I guess you could say, for the website because that's where, and let's face it, a lot of people they're on Facebook, sometimes all day when they should be working. So if you want to get your story in front of them, you want to get some information in front of them, that's probably one of the best places to go. So I encourage my reporters, both on print and digital, all right, be on these on social media, promoting your stories and talking to the audience, reaching out to the audience, because it allows for more access to the audience as well as the audience has access to that reporter. So you can go and you can ask one of the reporters a question and get an answer with a lot more immediacy. So we're constantly updating, especially Facebook, because we see a lot more traffic from Facebook than we do Twitter, except for sports. And sports is different. Sports, we get a lot more traffic on Twitter than we do Facebook, but that's beside itself. So the reporters are constantly updating, and it's a very lively Facebook page, as well as other social medias. We're getting a lot of feed from Instagram now. We're using Pinterest a lot more, and we're doing Periscope, which is a live broadcast that feeds through Twitter, and we're starting to get some interest in that. And I've got a guy on my digital team who's one of his specific jobs is to find new forms of social media that we can use for news and figure out how to use it for news. Like right now he's looking into Snapchat and how we can use Snapchat for news, and I'm excited what else we can come up with, because he's been at the forefront with our Facebook and Periscope and Twitter.
There's no slowing down, it sounds like. I mean, I thought at one point a couple years ago, all right, well, we've got Facebook and Twitter, now we can just, ride the wave. But there's always something new coming, isn't there?
Yes, there's always. I mean, what is true for right now is not going to be true in the next 6 months, or the next 3 months, or heck, even next week.
Yeah.
It's constantly changing, and I am constantly studying on what's coming up in the business and what I need to have my team ready for. You have to be nimble in this business anymore, as you know. I mean, you got to have a lot of fast turnaround. You got to be quick on your feet, and you got to be ready to fail in a few areas. Just don't make it a habit of always failing, but because things are changing so much, you're going to say I'm going to throw a bunch of resources at Periscope, but then Periscope failed. Periscope's a social media. They say Periscope fails. Oops, maybe I shouldn't have put all those people on working on Periscope, but well, shift around to the next thing. So you got to be able to make those decisions and learn from them.
Before we run out of time, let's talk about one other topic that you guys have been covering a lot lately, environmental issues. You mentioned aquaculture, fish, things that are changing, that are going on up in really all across northern Michigan, but it's getting a lot more attention lately.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's two areas in this which we've reported on quite a bit lately, and we were brought to our attention by Tippecanoe Watershed Council. We interviewed Jennifer McKay with Tippecanoe Watershed, who's an expert in both these areas. And that is the microbeads in the water. Microbeads would be those items used for exfoliants and shampoos and soaps and such when they get into the Great Lakes. And the fish see these little microscopic microbeads floating in the water, and they think, oh, that's food. And so they're gobbling up the food, and they make the fish sick, and it has a very negative impact on our environment. And there's some bills going through the state which are trying to address that, and we have some stories talking about those bills and the good and the bad about the bills. And the other one is basically fish farming, whether or not it's good. And I thought, before we did the story, I thought, wow, what's so wrong with farming for fish, these little fish farms in the Great Lakes? Well, as McKay pointed out to me, all that fish poop is going to be bad. I mean, when you put a bunch of fish in one area, they're going to defecate, and that defecation or fish poop in such a concentrated area can have negative environmental consequences for that area.
Yeah.
And like, oh, okay, that's a good
Didn't
point.
think about that,
Didn't
yeah.
think about that. So we started reporting on that and about the impacts of environment on it. And in fact, I had we had a guest column from Tippett Watershed Council on this very topic too. And I haven't seen much of this in other media, and I hope they pick it up too, because these are two issues I think that people really need to be aware of, because they have impact on the Great Lakes, which is so important to our local economy as well as our entire state.
Yeah, we've talked about it at this table before, fish farming and some of the economic impacts of that, but fish poop was definitely not one of the side effects that came out of that discussion. So
I had never thought of it that way. I mean, but you're right. I grew up around farms, so I understand how much manure can come from a cow farm, especially when you put all the cows in an enclosed space, or pigs.
Yeah,
I think the same thing with fish.
it's always something.
Yeah.
Lastly, anything going into the winter season or the holiday season that you want to touch on that Petoskey News does? Any special features for the holidays, or does anything change around this time of year?
One of my favorites from this time of year is coming up, and I look forward to every year, is we publish letters to Santa Claus that the children in the community write, and I have such a spectrum of emotions in reading those letters and typing. We'll hand type them in, the letters to Santa Claus from the kids, and we'll type them in exactly how the kids wrote them, which is kind of fun because you include all the misspellings and you include the way they'll write G.I. Joe or something like that. And some of them be so cute, some of them be so heart-tearing. You go from one reading, the kid wants a teddy bear and for her little brother, and then to the next one, I just want Daddy to be home from jail. There's just such a spectrum of emotions, but there's so much fun to put in the paper, and because we know Santa Claus is a reader of the Petoskey News-Review.
Of course.
And just like he is a listener at WTCM.
WTCM. He's a loyal listener.
Yes, he is.
Multi-time caller, too,
So it's fun to get that stuff in there. So it's a fun time. It's a fun time of the year. It's a fun time of the year to be in the media, too.
Excellent. Well, Jeremy, thanks for coming in. Appreciate having you making the trip down from Petoskey.
It's a pleasure.
Jeremy McBain from the Petoskey News-Review has been our guest, and we'll see you next time right here on The Briefing. Have a great day.